His betrayal led her to her first love. Chapter 1: Anniversary Surprise. Anaya Gibson sat at the dining table waiting for her husband for what felt like the 100th time, a touch dramatic, sure, but the ache in her chest made the exaggeration feel justified. Tonight was their 5-year anniversary. She had planned everything with tender precision: his favorite meal, candles flickering like tiny promises, and an envelope on the table that held her heart's next chapter. Yet the clock whispered its verdict. 11:20 p.m. She sighed, blew out the candles one by one, and began clearing the plates. As she reached for the last one, the front door swung open, ushering in Manhattan's winter breath and Stephen Gibson's weary silhouette. He shook snow from his jacket, hung it on the hook, and stepped inside, only to freeze at the sight of the table. Anna, oh God. I'm so sorry. The meeting just ran into oblivion. He wrapped an arm around her in a distracted half-hug, his eyes glued to his phone. His body was home, his mind was still chained to the office. Anaya studied him quietly, really studied him, and something hollow yawned open inside her. This was the man she had once imagined raising children with, growing old beside, building a life worth bragging about. Now he was a tired 37-year-old with a thinning hairline, an office belly, and a face that had forgotten how to light up when he saw her. Their past flickered through her memory like an old film reel. A Christmas party. A shared joke. Dates that felt like magic. Marriage that felt like a promise. Now they stood in a rented apartment because Stefan had spent 5 years deciding where he wanted to buy, and the romance had drained from their marriage like heat from a dying coal. Intimacy had become a ghost. She had become the quiet, reliable wife he assumed would always be waiting. Stefan. No response. Stefan, can we talk? A grunt. A nod. No eye contact. No pause in his typing. She tried once more, this time with the edge of urgency. Stefan, please. That finally tore his gaze from the screen. I'm listening, Anna. What is it? Anaya closed her eyes, pulled in a steadying breath, and spoke softly, but with a steadiness even she could feel. Tonight is our 5-year anniversary. I got something for us. She slid the envelope toward him. Stefan stared at it, then at her, and finally opened it. His brow furrowed. What is this, Anna? She smiled, just a little, the kind that trembled with hope. I've been saving up. I wanted to do something special for us. I bought the lake house we talked about. Now we can finally build our family. Stefan cut her off, anger rising like a storm. Anna, how could you do this without discussing it with me? This is irresponsible and stupid. We can't afford reckless decisions. I am the man in this house. You discuss everything with me. He paced, phone dangling from his hand like a forgotten limb. I did it as a surprise, she tried, but he wouldn't let her finish. No, absolutely not. We cannot afford this. You can't waste money like this. I didn't use our money, she said calmly. I used my freelance income. That stopped him. He spun toward her, eyes blazing. Your money? We're a team, Anna. It's our money. Her jaw tightened. Stefan, we agreed my freelance money is mine. You said it wouldn't be much anyway. Arguments had become their routine, their twisted tradition. In seconds, his voice had climbed to its familiar, ugly pitch. How stupid do you think I am? That little projects of yours paid for a lake house. He slammed the papers onto the table. The title deed slid off and drifted to the floor like a fallen truth. As she bent to pick it up, his phone buzzed. It faced her. She wasn't meant to see it. But she did. I miss you already. Stacy. The world lurched. Her heart froze mid-beat. Her hands trembled. She rose slowly, staring at Stefan. He turned the phone, locked it, and stormed out with no explanation, leaving her in the echo of a slammed door. Anaya's knees buckled. She gripped the chair, breath shaking, vision blurring. No, no, no. It's a mistake, she whispered to the empty hallway, but the silence only hardened the truth. Her anniversary surprise lay on the table, unwanted, unacknowledged, while her marriage fractured in real time. Chapter 2: The Truth Revealed. Anaya sat at the kitchen table and watched the sun climb over Manhattan like a slow confession. She hadn't slept. She hadn't moved. She'd simply sat there, replaying the message on Stefan's phone until the words carved themselves into her bones. I miss you already. Signed by someone named Stacy. Their marriage was never a fairy tale. No rose petals, no fireworks, not even a sparkler on New Year's. But it had been a marriage. A promise. A thing she'd tended like a garden she believed would bloom someday. Now she realized it had been dying for years while she watered it alone. The front door opened. Stefan stepped in, and for a long, brittle minute they just stared at each other. He didn't speak. He simply walked to the bedroom. Zippers. Hangers. The hollow percussion of drawers opening and shutting. Then he reappeared with a suitcase and a defeated sort of shame carved into his features. We tried, he said, as though that were enough to bury 5 years. And he walked out, closing the door on her, on them, on everything. Something inside Anaya fractured completely. She had built her entire life around this man, abandoned her graphics work, severed ties she once cherished, and settled into a version of herself that always came second. Now all she had to show for it was a cheating husband and a rented apartment full of ghosts. She slid the title deed of the lake house back into the envelope with trembling fingers. Then she drifted to the bathroom like a shadow wearing her skin. The shower hissed cold when she stepped under it, but she didn't care. That icy water became the place where she finally broke. She cried, not delicate tears, but years of unspoken ache cracking out of her. She cried for the life she gave up, the woman she used to be, the safety she never found, the love she never received. She cried until there was nothing left inside her but a hollow, aching quiet. When she finally stepped out, she dressed simply. Jeans, a warm gray sweater, a version of herself rebuilt from scraps. She poured herself a cup of coffee in the kitchen, though she never drank it. She just stared at the dark surface, seeing a stranger's life reflected back at her. Then something in her chest, something small, fierce, long neglected, snapped awake. Anaya moved. She grabbed her suitcase. She packed with the urgency of a woman clawing her way out of a grave. Minutes later, she stood at the front door, looking at the apartment that had felt less like a home and more like a cage. She stepped outside and didn't look back. Her suitcase thudded into the back seat. The car engine hummed to life. She took a final breath of the stale hallway air, then drove. The city thinned behind her, the road stretching ahead like a promise she wasn't ready to believe in. She turned the radio up, letting some dreamy indie voice drown out the past. Her face carried no expression, her eyes empty, but her mind held a single ember. Start over. Move forward. The world softened as she drove, buildings giving way to green, noise giving way to silence. She rolled down the window and let the fresh air kiss her cheeks like an apology she didn't ask for. She took a left turn when the road forked, guided by instinct more than memory. 5 more miles. The trees parted like curtains on a stage she was meant to step onto. And there it was. Her lake house. Her refuge. Her beginning. Anaya parked and simply stared. Let herself breathe. Let herself imagine a life that wasn't built around someone else's absence. Finally, she stepped out, stretched, hauled her suitcase behind her, and found the key in her bag. The lock groaned. The hinges protested. But the house opened for her anyway. Sunlight flooded in, dancing off dust motes like tiny blessings. She walked to the sliding doors and pushed them open, letting the scent of pine and water wash over her. The lake shimmered in the dying light. And for the first time in 5 long, lonely years, Anaya Gibson smiled. Chapter 3: New Beginnings. Anaya sat on the porch, legs curled beneath her, eyes following the lake as it shifted from glassy calm to ripples whenever a jet ski sliced through its serenity. Peace. Real, living peace. And for the first time in her adult life, it belonged entirely to her. 3 weeks at the lake house had turned her into a woman she almost recognized, sleeping when she felt like it, working when inspiration tugged, ignoring all 20 missed calls from Stefan without a flicker of guilt. She'd hired a lawyer the moment she arrived. The divorce papers had been served 2 weeks ago. She wasn't running anymore. She was building. Because the truth was, this empire started long before Stefan stormed out. 3 years ago, she found a smear of lipstick on one of his shirts, a shade she never wore, bold and taunting against the fabric. That was the night she stopped pretending their marriage was anything but a sinking ship. Anaya had quietly rebuilt her world from the inside out. She'd taken on more graphic design clients, opened a separate account, funneled every cent there. 3 years later, that secret account stood at €500,000. Enough to buy the lake house. Enough to buy her freedom. Her phone buzzed beside her on the porch table. David, lawyer. She answered on the second ring. David, is it done? His voice was crisp and warm, like a man who liked delivering good news. It's done. He signed. You're officially divorced. I'll have the final papers sent to you in the morning. Anaya exhaled into the cool night air, watching her breath bloom like smoke. For the first time in 5 years, she felt light. Unburdened. Free. The next 2 months blurred into something almost holy. She worked until her fingers protested, until her eyes begged for sleep. Her freelance business was exploding, new clients every week, her calendar filling faster than she could color-code it. She lived on coffee, ambition, and the sweetness of not having to answer to anyone. Then came the email. A rebranding and marketing portfolio request from the company of one Alexia Cunningham. The name tugged at a dusty corner of her memory, but Anaya brushed it off and kept reading. La Récolte du Village, an elite restaurant, whispered about in magazines and frequented by people who measured life in 5-star experiences, wanted her for their rebrand. And the budget. The budget was a creative's wildest dream. A blank check. A blank canvas. A doorway. Anaya had to study herself. She reread the email. Then she opened a new tab and typed, Alexia Cunningham. And, just like that, her stomach dropped through the floor. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as her mind catapulted 20 years back to a high school art room where she hid behind canvases and unspoken longing. Alexia Cunningham. The exchange student from France. The girl who looked like she'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting and into Anaya's bloodstream. She remembered that day as if it were stitched to her skin. Alexia standing by the teacher's desk, blonde hair pulled into a high ponytail, a few rebellious strands brushing her cheeks. Her blouse stretched delicately across her chest, the top buttons undone, revealing the smooth, pale curve of her collarbone. Anaya had stared like she was studying divinity. Emerald eyes, sculpted features, a presence that pulled every nerve in Anaya's body taut. And then Alexia looked up, caught her staring. Their eyes locked, and the world tilted. Alexia walked toward her with slow, measured steps, hips moving with a confidence Anaya had never possessed. She stopped just a few feet away. And the bell shrieked, their classmates stampeded between them, and Alexia vanished into the hallway mess of backpacks and chatter. For the rest of the year, Anaya avoided her like a sinner avoiding salvation, but craving every interaction that never came. If Alexia approached, she ran. If she sat alone at break, she chose the farthest possible corner. Because Alexia was everything, she wasn't brave enough to want out loud. She was only cowardly admiring her from afar. She transferred schools the next year. And Alexia Cunningham became a quiet ache she never confessed, the kind that stays tucked under the ribs, unforgettable no matter how much time bleeds by. Now here she was again. Not in a classroom, but in Anaya's orbit, offering a contract that could change her life. Jesus, Anaya, she won't even remember you, she muttered, shaking her head. Just take the job. But her heart, traitorous thing, was already pounding a little too hard. Chapter 4. The Meeting. Anaya stared at her laptop screen like it might bite if she touched it. The cursor blinked innocently, almost mockingly, at the empty reply box in her email. Her heart argued with her mind in waves. She won't remember me. She probably doesn't care. It's just a job. Focus. And yet, every nerve in her body whispered otherwise. She exhaled, ran a hand through her hair, and typed. Thank you for reaching out. I would be delighted to meet and discuss your project. Then she stared at the send button like it was the edge of a cliff. She hovered her finger, hesitated, and finally clicked. The die was cast. That night, sleep eluded her. Every scenario played like a film on fast forward, Alexia smiling, Alexia laughing, Alexia not remembering her at all. The thought made her stomach twist, but it also sparked something sharper, fiercer, determination. The next morning, Anaya dressed with deliberate care. Simple elegance, nothing over the top, just enough to feel like herself, confident, capable, untouchable. She could not afford to be swept away by nostalgia. Not today. Not ever again. She drove through the city, the streets unusually quiet, her mind a swirl of anticipation and anxiety. She might not even recognize me. I have changed. She has changed. Maybe this is just business. When she arrived at the sleek, glass-fronted office of La Récolte du Village, her breath caught. The nameplate gleamed like a promise. Anaya walked in, heels clicking softly against the polished floor, and asked the receptionist for Alexia Cunningham. A moment later, the door opened, and there she was. Alexia. Everything Anaya remembered, the elegance, the posture, the effortless grace, was magnified. The blonde hair now cascading freely over her shoulders, her emerald eyes scanning the room with calm precision, lips curving into a polite, professional smile. And then the eyes widened slightly. Recognition flickered, or maybe it was just curiosity, before the polished exterior returned. Alexia extended her hand. You must be Anaya. Thank you for coming. Anaya swallowed, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. She took the hand, firm, deliberate. It's my pleasure. They moved to a sleek, minimalistic meeting room. Papers, portfolios, and the faint scent of expensive coffee filled the space. Anaya couldn't focus immediately. She was too busy noting the familiar tilt of Alexia's smile, the way her hair caught the light, the subtle fragrance that seemed to anchor her memories. Alexia opened the conversation with business, the project, the goals, the vision, and Anaya responded with confidence, articulating ideas, sketching concepts, showing the client she was all professionalism and creativity. And yet, between the words, Anaya felt the undercurrent of their shared past brush against her, fleeting glances, half-smiles, tiny hesitations. She caught herself staring once, then looked away, heart thudding. She remembers. No, she can't. Not yet. The meeting lasted an hour. The project outline was solid, the budget generous, the opportunity undeniable. Alexia's professional demeanor was impeccable, but every so often, Anaya swore she saw a spark, a fraction of recognition, or maybe imagination on her part. When the meeting ended, Alexia stood, smiled politely again. I look forward to seeing your initial concepts. Anaya nodded, words catching in her throat. Absolutely. I'll have them to you soon. As she left the building, Anaya exhaled sharply, releasing a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The city hummed around her, but inside, a storm of old memories and new possibilities raged. This is it. This is where the past meets the future. And I am ready. Chapter 5. Sparks Beneath the Surface. Anaya walked back into her studio with a mixture of relief and adrenaline still coursing through her veins. The meeting with Alexia had gone smoothly, too smoothly, perhaps. Professional, polite, impeccably poised. But that flicker in Alexia's eyes, it refused to leave her mind. She might not even remember me, Anaya reminded herself firmly. It's just business. Focus. She set her bag down, poured herself a coffee, and opened her sketchbook. The ideas flowed, colors and layouts forming under her fingers. But her concentration was punctuated by her own mind wandering to Alexia's smile, the curve of her jaw, the tiny way her fingers had lingered on the portfolio as she passed it back. By noon, Anaya's phone buzzed. Alexia Cunningham, can we go over some adjustments? Your initial concepts are very good, but I have a few thoughts. Anaya's heart skipped. She typed carefully. Absolutely. When would you like to meet? Within minutes, Alexia's reply came. How about 3 p.m. at your studio? I'd like to see your revisions in person. The afternoon arrived. Anaya tidied her workspace meticulously, adjusting every pencil, every paper, until the room was pristine. She wanted control over this, over herself, over the environment, over the moment. A knock on the door made her jump. She straightened her sweater, smoothed her hair, and opened the door. Alexia stood there, effortlessly elegant, with that calm, measured gaze that always seemed to take in everything and nothing at once. She held a cup of coffee in one hand and her portfolio in the other, casual yet deliberate. "Thanks for letting me come by," Alexia said, her voice warm but professional. "Of course," Anaya replied, stepping aside. "I'm glad you could make it." They settled at the table, portfolios open, ideas exchanged. Alexia's critiques were sharp but fair, and Anaya countered with suggestions, revisions, and creative sparks. There was an easy rhythm to their exchange, a dance of intellect and artistry. "You know," Alexia said, tilting her head slightly, "your use of texture here, it's unexpected." "I didn't see it coming." Anaya blinked, heat rising to her cheeks. "I like to surprise people." Alexia raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in her emerald eyes. "I can tell. You're very thorough." Anaya smiled, careful to keep it professional. But inside, a tiny thrill surged. That subtle spark, the one she had chased for years, it was there, undeniable, flickering in the space between them. She reminded herself again, she probably doesn't remember. She's just being polite. Yet the more they talked, the more Anaya caught herself glancing at Alexia, noticing the tilt of her head, the light in her eyes when she grew passionate about the project, the soft laugh that escaped when Anaya teased her lightly about font choices. "Professional. Keep it professional." Anaya's inner voice scolded. When the meeting ended, Alexia stood and stretched, placing her portfolio back in her bag. "I'll be eager to see the next draft." "You're very talented, Anaya." "Thank you," Anaya said, heart hammering. "I'll have it ready soon." They shared a brief look, charged with something unsaid, and Alexia turned and walked toward the door. Anaya watched her leave, exhaling slowly, trying to steady the storm inside her. Maybe she does remember. Maybe she doesn't. Either way, this is just the beginning. Chapter 6: Mock UPS and Memories. Anaya sat at her desk, sunlight streaming through the large studio windows, dust motes catching in the air like tiny sparks. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then moved deftly across the sketchpad, brushing colors and shapes into place. She was creating the mock-ups for Alexia's project, each menu layout, logo iteration, and visual guide carefully crafted to reflect the upmarket elegance of La Récolte du Village. But with every design she finalized, every palette choice she settled on, her mind wandered, inevitably to Alexia. "She probably doesn't remember me," Anaya murmured aloud, though her voice wavered in the quiet room. The thought was supposed to steady her, to make the professional boundaries clear, but it did the opposite. She remembered high school, the faint French accent, the effortless elegance, the way Alexia had moved across the classroom like she owned the sunlight itself. And now here she was again, composed, poised, professional, but closer, tangible, and infinitely more magnetic. Anaya shook her head and focused on the screen. Each mock-up she created was clean, precise, thoughtful. She attached the files to an email, her fingers hovering over the send button. "It's just business. Nothing more." Still, she typed a note. "Dear Alexia, attached are the first round of mock-ups. I've tried to incorporate your preferences as discussed. I'm eager to hear your thoughts. Best, Anaya." She paused, staring at the email like it was a confession. Clicking send sent a tiny shock through her, a mix of anticipation and dread. An hour later, her phone buzzed. "Alexia Cunningham. Looks great, Anna. Just a few tweaks. Can we go over them tomorrow morning?" Anaya froze, then stared at the text. "Anna?" She called me Anna. A tiny smile flickered. Was that familiarity, or just professional shorthand? She couldn't tell, and part of her didn't want to know. She probably just doesn't remember. She would have used my full name if she didn't, right? The next morning, Anaya arrived at the studio early, clutching her notebook like armor. When Alexia walked in, coffee in hand and hair catching the morning light, Anaya's pulse picked up. "Good morning," Alexia said, her voice calm and pleasant. "Ready to review the mock-ups?" "Absolutely," Anaya replied, opening her laptop. They went through each design, Alexia pointing out minor adjustments, text spacing here, color balance there. Anaya implemented each suggestion efficiently, silently praising herself for keeping the conversation strictly professional. But every so often, Alexia lingered on a detail with a look that made Anaya's stomach tighten. There was that spark again, that brush of connection, that subtle something in the way Alexia's gaze softened just for a moment. Anaya reminded herself firmly, she probably doesn't know who I am. She's just being thorough. It's just business. By the end of the review, the mock-ups were nearly perfect. Alexia leaned back in her chair, sipping her coffee, and gave a small smile. "Good work, Anna. I think these will resonate with our clientele." "Thank you," Anaya said, forcing a smile, hiding the sudden, wild hope that maybe, just maybe, Alexia remembered, but couldn't admit it. As Alexia gathered her things and left the studio, Anaya exhaled. She stared at the empty doorway, heart thudding. She might not know. She might not even remember. But it doesn't matter. This time I'm ready and I'm in control. Chapter 6: Internal Sparks. Anaya sat back in her chair, staring at the clean lines of the mock-up she had just finalized. Her fingers lingered on the trackpad, but her mind was elsewhere. "Anna," she whispered under her breath, the name curling on her tongue like a memory she wasn't ready to touch. Why would she call me Anna? That was the name only her friends used in high school. Everyone else had always called me Anaya. And Alexia Cunningham, she wasn't exactly the type to use casual nicknames for people she barely knew, was she? Her mind raced, flipping through memories she had buried for years. The art class. The back of the classroom. Her ponytail swaying as she leaned over the sketchbook. That soft accent. That smile that made my stomach tighten. Could she possibly remember? Or was it coincidence, professional shorthand, just an innocent, automatic gesture? Maybe she just likes brevity. Maybe she didn't even think about it. But the more she told herself that, the less convincing it sounded. Because Alexia had always been precise. Exact. Attentive. The kind of person who noticed details most people didn't. And yet, she used Anna. Anaya's chest tightened. She tried to steady her racing thoughts. Don't read too much into it. It's business. It's a contract. It's a name. Nothing more. But deep down, a small, insistent spark flickered, the same spark she had felt in high school. The spark she thought she'd buried along with all those years of longing and fear. "Maybe she remembers," Anaya admitted quietly, but she scolded herself immediately. No, she can't. I was invisible back then. I disappeared before she even knew I existed. This is just coincidence. Still, every time she typed a reply, every time Alexia's name appeared in her inbox, that spark danced a little brighter, teasing her, whispering promises she wasn't ready to acknowledge. Just focus on the work. That's all that matters. Just the work. But as she looked at the screen, her heartbeat still quickened. Anna. The name felt like a key, unlocking memories she had tried to lock away. And somewhere, buried under the calm professionalism she wore like armor, Anaya couldn't stop wondering, what if she does remember? What if she's been waiting for this moment too? Chapter 7: Professional Sparks. Anaya hit send on the email containing the first batch of mock-ups and immediately leaned back in her chair. The soft hum of the office air conditioner mixed with the faint smell of coffee from her cup. She told herself, firmly, that this was just work. Nothing more. But she couldn't stop thinking about that text. Anna. Minutes later, her phone buzzed. Alexia Cunningham, received. Great start, Anna. Just a few adjustments. Can you swing by tomorrow to go over them in person? Anaya blinked. Anna, again. Her fingers tapped the edge of her desk, restless. She probably just likes nicknames. Or maybe she forgot my full name. It's nothing. Just business. The next morning, Anaya arrived at the studio, portfolio tucked under her arm, nerves buzzing. Alexia was already there, reviewing a few papers, her blonde hair tied back in that signature high ponytail. The sunlight caught in her strands, haloing her as she glanced up. "Morning, Anna," Alexia said, offering a small, warm smile. "Ready to go through these?" Anaya's pulse skipped, but she forced a professional calm over her expression. "Absolutely." They spread the mock-ups across the table. Alexia's fingers brushed a few designs here and there, her eyes sharp, her critique precise. "This one," she said, pointing to a menu layout, "the spacing feels off. The header font, maybe something bolder, more confident. It needs to speak to our clientele." "Got it," Anaya replied smoothly, making notes. Inside, she felt a flutter. Every glance, every tiny smile from Alexia seemed weighted with something just beneath the surface. "You've really captured the essence of the brand," Alexia added after a pause, "but I want the visuals to feel alive. Like they're inviting people in, not just presenting them with options." Anaya nodded, scribbling ideas. "I can do that. Maybe some subtle texture overlays, warm tones for the header, soft highlights on the menu sections to draw the eye naturally." Alexia's lips quirked in approval. "Exactly. That's what I'm talking about." The rest of the morning passed in a similar rhythm, precise, focused, professional. But for Anaya, every comment carried a heartbeat. Every pause, every glance made her question herself. Does she remember? Or is this just how she is with everyone? By the time they wrapped up, Alexia leaned back, stretching slightly. "You've done really well, Anna. These mock-ups have potential. I'll need the revised set by the end of the week." "Of course," Anaya replied, voice steady. Inside, a tiny spark of hope had ignited. After Alexia left, Anaya stayed at the table a little longer, staring at the designs. Her mind raced, replaying every subtle expression, every casual Anna. "Maybe she does remember," she whispered to herself. Then scolded herself immediately. "No, it doesn't matter. It's just work. Focus on the work." But the truth was, the line between professional admiration and something far more personal was already starting to blur. And somewhere deep inside, Anaya couldn't wait to see Alexia again. Chapter 8. Edits and Teasing. Anaya sat at her desk, headphones on, music low but pulsing through the studio. The mock-ups were open, her notes from Alexia beside her, and she was ready to dive in. She told herself, just work, but the flutter in her chest betrayed her calm. Her phone buzzed. "Alexia Cunningham. Quick question. The second mock-up, the menu section with the wine list. Can you make the titles a bit more playful? Not childish, just engaging." Anaya typed back with a professional tone, "Absolutely. I'll make some adjustments and send it over today." As she worked, her mind wandered, replaying Alexia's last visit. That soft Anna, the casual ease, the way Alexia's eyes had lingered for just a beat too long. It doesn't mean anything. She's just polite. She's efficient. She's Alexia Cunningham. Still, when she crafted the playful titles, she couldn't resist putting in a subtle nod to their shared past, a little Easter egg, an inside joke she doubted Alexia would catch. Just in case. By mid-afternoon, she had finished the edits. The designs were sharper, warmer, more alive. She attached the files to an email and paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Should I add a note?" She typed, deleted, typed again. "Here's the revised mock-up for your notes. I hope you like the new touches. Anna." Her breath caught. She couldn't stop thinking about it, the name. Almost immediately, her phone buzzed again. Alexia's reply lit up the screen. "Anna, these are perfect. I love the playful touches, very you. Let's go over the details tomorrow. Can't wait to see what else you come up with." Anaya froze. "Very you?" She blinked at the screen. Her heart skipped. That little phrase, so casual, yet so knowing, made her pulse quicken. She shook her head and laughed quietly to herself. "No, it's just a compliment. Just professional admiration." The next day, Anaya arrived at the studio with a stack of printouts. Alexia was already there, arranging papers on the table, looking effortless and impossibly poised. "Morning, Anna," Alexia greeted again, warm and casual. Ready to dive in? Yes, absolutely, Anaya replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She spread the mock-ups across the table, and Alexia leaned over them, scanning each one with her usual precision. You added some clever touches here, Alexia said, pointing at one of the menu layouts. I didn't expect this playful element. It really brings the design to life. Just experimenting, Anaya said lightly, trying to sound nonchalant. Inside, she was buzzing. The way Alexia's eyes sparkled when she smiled, the way she leaned just a fraction closer, it all felt so familiar. They worked together for hours, adjusting fonts, tweaking colors, and discussing layouts. Every suggestion from Alexia carried a subtle rhythm, a back and forth that was professional, yet intimate in the smallest, most tantalizing ways. At the end of the session, Alexia stood back and surveyed the table. Anna, this is amazing. You've exceeded my expectations. Thank you, Anaya said softly, her mind replaying that single word Alexia had used in the email, you. As she packed her things to leave, Alexia looked at her, tilting her head slightly. You know, it's nice working with someone who just gets it. Someone who understands the vision without me having to explain every detail. Anaya smiled politely, her heart thumping. Someone who remembers. Someone who notices. Could it be? She shook her head as she walked out. No, it's just work. Just business. But as she drove back to her lake house, her thoughts kept circling, replaying the moments, the touches, the casual Anna. That little spark, the one she tried to ignore, was growing. And deep down, she couldn't wait for the next meeting. Chapter 9. Testing the Waters. Anaya sat at her desk, the afternoon sun spilling across her laptop and sketchpads. She stared at the latest mock-ups for Alexia's brand Afresh, tapping her pen against her lip. She tried to focus, telling herself, just edits, just work. Yet the memory of Alexia's casual Anna and the warmth in her tone wouldn't leave her mind. No, she doesn't remember. She's just polite, professional. Still, Anaya found herself making tiny adjustments, playful elements, subtle nods to their high school inside jokes. Little flourishes she hoped Alexia might notice, though she tried to act like they were purely aesthetic. Her phone buzzed. Alexia Cunningham, loving these touches, Anna. Did you sneak in a little secret message in the dessert section? Clever. Anaya blinked. Secret message? She noticed. She typed back quickly, keeping her fingers steady despite her heart racing. Just thought it might add a little whimsy, glad you caught it. The reply was almost immediate. Whimsy suits you. Makes the designs alive. Very alive. Anaya shook her head, laughing softly. Professional. Just professional. The next day, she arrived at the studio carrying a binder of printouts, prepared to present her latest edits. Alexia was already there, her blonde hair tied neatly, glasses perched on her nose as she examined a mock-up. Morning, Anna, Alexia said, her voice casual but with that same warmth. I went over these last night, you've outdone yourself again. Thank you, Anaya replied, trying to keep her tone light. But her stomach fluttered, her palms tingled, and she couldn't stop noticing how effortlessly Alexia moved around the studio, how precise yet fluid her gestures were. They worked side by side, discussing font choices, layout shifts, and color schemes. Alexia would occasionally lean over Anaya's shoulder, brushing just close enough to make her heart race, her scent faint but intoxicating. So, Alexia said suddenly, pointing at a small flourish Anaya had inserted into the wine list, you think I'd notice little things like this? Apparently you do, Anaya said, trying to sound neutral, though a smile tugged at her lips. Alexia grinned, her eyes sparkling. Good. I like someone who pays attention. Someone who cares about the details. Anaya's chest tightened. She swallowed. Cares? About me? Or just the work? She kept her voice steady. I care about the work. The details make all the difference. Alexia leaned back, crossing her arms. True. But sometimes the details tell a story. Anaya's fingers twitched. That tone, that glance, it was both professional and teasing, just the tiniest hint of something more. She forced herself to focus, to point out corrections in the layout, to explain color balance. Still, as she packed up to leave, Alexia called after her, "Anna, I'm serious. These flourishes. I want more. Keep them coming. I trust your instincts." Anaya's pulse leapt. Trusts my instincts. She remembers. She has to. She shook her head as she stepped into the sunlight, laughing quietly to herself. No, it's nothing. Just work. But as she drove home, every glance in the rearview mirror, every replayed phrase in her mind, made it clear the playful tension wasn't going anywhere. And deep down, she knew she couldn't wait for the next meeting. Chapter 10. Sparks Ignite. Anaya arrived at the studio earlier than usual, her binder clutched tightly, a mix of nerves and excitement buzzing in her veins. She told herself to focus on the work, layouts, typography, colors, but every instinct she had whispered otherwise. Alexia was already there, sipping coffee and scrolling through her tablet. She looked up and smiled, her green eyes catching the morning light. "Early bird catches the worm, huh? Or maybe I just didn't want to miss your critique," Anaya said, letting a faint smile slip through. She immediately chastised herself. Professional. Just professional. Alexia raised an eyebrow, her lips curling in that infuriatingly charming way. "Flattery already? You're too easy, Anna." Anaya laughed lightly, trying to mask the sudden thrum in her chest. "I'm just honest." Alexia leaned closer, her elbow brushing Anaya's arm. The contact sent a jolt through her. "Honest, huh? I like that. Makes it easier to trust someone." Trust. Again, with the trust. Anaya tried to keep her thoughts in check. She opened her binder and began presenting her latest mock-ups. "So, for the new menu, I tried to bring in subtle hints of the season, keeping it elegant but inviting." Alexia glanced at the designs, nodding thoughtfully. I can see that. But I think the dessert section could be a little mischievous. You know, playful." Anaya's fingers itched to push a tiny flourish in something only Alexia would catch. She dared a small tweak, a flourish shaped like a hidden vine curling around a dessert illustration. "Mischievous enough?" she asked, tilting her head. Alexia's eyes widened slightly, then she smirked. "Anna, that's perfect. Clever. How did you know I'd notice?" Anaya swallowed, her heart racing. She knows. She has to know. "Lucky guess," she said lightly, though her mind was screaming. Alexia leaned back, studying her. "I like someone who pays attention. Someone who notices." Her tone carried a playful weight, and Anaya felt the spark ignite. They spent the next hour moving side by side, debating colors and layouts, their hands occasionally brushing, each touch sending electric shivers up Anaya's arm. Finally, as Anaya packed her binder to leave, Alexia's voice stopped her at the door. "Anna, keep this up. I want more of these little secrets. You make the designs alive. And I like it." Anaya's lips curved into a smile, her pulse racing. "Alive." She said alive. She walked to her car, pretending to be calm, but her mind was a storm of thoughts, a single, overwhelming certainty. Something is happening here. Something more than work. As she started the car and drove away, she let herself imagine, just for a moment, the world where Alexia remembered. Where the teasing, the sparks, the subtle acknowledgments were not professional, but personal. And the thought made her heart pound in a way it hadn't in years. Chapter 11. Hidden Signals. The next morning, Anaya arrived at the studio with her usual mix of professionalism and fluttering anticipation. She carried a small notebook she'd been doodling in the night before, sketches, playful little annotations, and just enough subtle nods to the high school memories she dared not speak aloud. Alexia was already there, reviewing printed proofs, her blonde hair caught up loosely with a few stray strands softening her face. She looked up as Anaya entered, her eyes lighting with a spark of mischief. "Back so soon?" Alexia teased. "I was just thinking about adding a few surprises to the wine menu." Anaya's pulse skipped. "Surprises, huh? I might have some ideas," she said, letting her fingers linger over a small sketch she'd tucked into the binder, a tiny flourish, barely noticeable, shaped like a vine curling into a heart. Alexia glanced down and raised an eyebrow. Anna, clever. Very clever. She held Anaya's gaze a beat too long, and a shiver ran through her. She notices. She has to notice. Anaya smiled, careful not to let her excitement show too much. I just like details. They tell stories, sometimes more than words ever could. Alexia's lips curled into a knowing grin. Stories, huh? You've always had a knack for that. Makes me wonder what other stories you're hiding. Anaya's throat went dry. The words, the tone, it felt like Alexia was teasing her for more than just her professional work. And in her heart, Anaya knew she had to push gently, just to see if Alexia would rise to the challenge. Maybe one day, Anaya said lightly, leaning over the table to adjust a layout. Their shoulders brushed, and the contact lingered a second longer than necessary. But only if you noticed the right details. Alexia's eyes sparkled, and she leaned closer, whispering almost conspiratorially, I think I notice plenty. Maybe too much. Anaya's fingers trembled, and she had to look away, pretending to focus on the mock-ups in front of her. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears. The rest of the morning passed with that delicate dance, each comment, each suggestion, each brush of a hand carefully measured, testing boundaries, flirting on the edge of professional propriety. When it was finally time to leave, Alexia called after her, Anna, your little details. Keep them coming. You're making this project unforgettable. Anaya stepped into the sunlight, a slow smile spreading across her face. Unforgettable. She's remembering something. I just know it. As she drove home, she allowed herself a moment to imagine that world, the world where Alexia's teasing wasn't just professional, where the little sparks weren't just design flourishes, but echoes of something more. And for the first time in years, Anaya felt the thrill of possibility coursing through her, daring her to take the next step. Chapter 12. A Whisper of the Past. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the studio blinds as Anaya carefully placed a small envelope on Alexia's desk. It wasn't much, just a single sheet of high-quality paper with a sketch tucked inside. A vine curling delicately around a single word, remember. Her heart raced as she stepped back, pretending to adjust the lighting in the room. Professional, just professional, she whispered to herself, but her fingers tingled with anticipation. Alexia looked up from her tablet, her brow arched in curiosity. What's this? Anaya offered a light shrug, hiding her nerves behind a casual smile. Just something I thought might inspire the menu layout. Call it a little creative flourish. Alexia's fingers brushed the envelope, lingering on the paper for a heartbeat too long. Her lips curved in that infuriatingly knowing way. Anna, this is exquisite. Where did you? Her voice faltered, just slightly. Anaya's pulse spiked. That hesitation, that slight falter, was enough to tell her something she hadn't dared to hope. Alexia remembered. She remembered. I thought it might spark an idea, Anaya said lightly, keeping her voice steady even though her heart was hammering. Details matter, don't they? Alexia's green eyes glimmered, and she leaned back in her chair, folding her hands over the envelope. Yes, details. Always tell the most interesting stories. I wonder what story you're trying to tell me. Anaya's cheeks warmed, and she quickly turned to adjust the mock-ups, careful to hide the small, triumphant smile tugging at her lips. She noticed. She really noticed. The rest of the morning passed with a delicious tension. Each suggestion, each playful correction, each fleeting brush of their hands felt charged with unspoken history. Every laugh shared was layered with memories neither had dared to mention, yet both felt keenly. When Anaya finally packed up to leave, Alexia's voice stopped her at the door. Anna, thank you for this. Anaya turned, meeting her gaze, and for a heartbeat the studio felt like it had shrunk around them. Anytime, she said softly, letting her smile linger just long enough. Outside, as she walked to her car, Anaya let herself breathe freely for the first time that morning. The envelope, the sketch, the word remember, it was a quiet challenge, a spark, and it had worked. She slid into the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel lightly, and whispered to herself, She remembers. She remembers me. And for the first time since receiving that life-altering email, Anaya allowed herself to imagine what could happen if the professional spark they'd nurtured began to ignite something far more personal. Chapter 13. Echoes returned. The next morning, Anaya arrived at the studio to find a neatly folded note waiting for her on her workstation. Her breath caught before she even touched it. The paper was simple, elegant, and unmistakably Alexia's style. Details do tell stories, Anna, and sometimes stories are worth remembering. Her heart raced. The single initial, the choice of words, the understated intimacy, it was unmistakable. Alexia remembered. She truly remembered. Anaya smoothed the note carefully, holding it for just a moment longer than necessary, letting the thrill pulse through her. She tucked it into her notebook, pretending to check her sketches, while stealing glances at Alexia, who was pretending to be absorbed in a screen. "So," Alexia said lightly, looking up with a teasing smile, "you're going to make me work for every little detail, aren't you?" Anaya's pulse spiked, but she kept her expression casual. "It wouldn't be as fun if you didn't notice, would it?" she replied, leaning over the table to adjust a mock-up. Their elbows brushed, lingering just a moment longer than necessary. Alexia's green eyes sparkled, and she leaned back slightly, pretending to be absorbed in her notes, but clearly watching Anaya. "You have a way of making the simplest things feel meaningful. I wonder how long you've been saving that talent for me." Anaya's lips twitched into a small, secret smile. "Talent for the right audience," she said softly, her voice dipping just enough to carry a hint of personal weight. They worked side by side, the professional pretense wrapping around them like a delicate veil, but every brush of hands, every shared glance, every sly smile carried a history that neither could quite hide. During a short break, Anaya poured herself a coffee and glanced at Alexia, who was sketching new ideas with her signature intensity. She couldn't resist, leaning slightly over the table. "You didn't have to write me a note, you know." Alexia looked up, her lips curling in that mischievous, knowing way. "I couldn't resist. You left the invitation open. I had to respond." Anna. The name, that high school nickname, fell easily from her lips, carrying weight, memory, and something more. Anaya froze for just a heartbeat, then let herself exhale slowly. She remembers everything. She's not just playing along. The rest of the day was a careful dance, professional enough to keep appearances, personal enough to let the spark smolder just beneath the surface. When Anaya finally left the studio, she felt the exhilaration deep in her chest. Alexia had acknowledged her, returned the gesture, and in that subtle, perfect way, she had lit the first real flame. As she drove home, Anaya allowed herself to imagine all the possibilities, her mind spinning with quiet delight. For the first time since seeing Alexia's name in that email, she felt the thrilling certainty that some connections, no matter the years apart, never truly fade. Chapter 14. Colliding Worlds. Anaya had just finished arranging a set of mock-ups on her laptop when the soft hum of the lake house doorbell startled her. Frowning, she set the coffee aside and walked to the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, not until Alexia arrived later in the afternoon. When she opened it, her heart skipped not from the familiar, steady warmth she'd felt for Alexia, but a jolt of tension, sharp and unwelcome. "Stefan." The name hung on her lips, disbelief and restrained fury mingling. Stefan Gibson, briefcase in hand, coat dusted with the remnants of Manhattan winter, looked every bit like the man who had shattered 5 years of her life. And now here he was, standing on her doorstep, his expression a mix of regret and awkwardness. "Anaya. I wanted to talk. I know I messed up." His voice was low, almost pleading. Anaya's fingers tightened around the doorframe. "I don't need this. I am free. I have nothing to say to you," she replied, forcing calm over the storm of anger roiling inside her. "I am done with the past, Stefan. Leave." Before he could respond, another sound echoed from the driveway, the soft click of high heels on the porch steps. Anaya turned sharply and froze. Alexia Cunningham, carrying her portfolio and a casual, confident smile, stepped through the gate. Her gaze met Anaya's for just a moment, a flicker of surprise crossing her delicate features as she noticed the tension. "Anaya, I hope I'm not interrupting anything," Alexia said, her voice warm but carrying that unmistakable undertone that made Anaya's heart race. Stefan's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene, the woman who had been his wife's quiet strength and secret life now standing at her doorstep, elegant and poised. He shifted awkwardly, clearly unprepared for this other world Anaya had built. "I just came to talk," Stefan stammered, but Alexia, noticing the tension, raised a hand gracefully. "It seems the timing isn't great," she said, her gaze soft but sharp. "Maybe another day?" She glanced at Anaya, her eyes holding a question and a promise all at once. Anaya's heart twisted. Alexia remembers me. She sees me. She understands me. She forced a composed smile. "No. Today is perfect and Stefan was just leaving," she said firmly, turning slightly to subtly shield Alexia from Stefan's scrutinizing stare. Stefan's lips pressed into a thin line, a flash of frustration crossing his features. "Anaya. No. Goodbye, Stefan," Anaya said firmly, her voice calm but steel-edged. She stepped aside, closing the door gently, deliberately, leaving him standing on the porch as she turned to Alexia. Alexia's hand brushed against Anaya's as she handed over the portfolio. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly, the soft concern in her voice sending warmth straight to Anaya's chest. Anaya exhaled, her shoulders loosening. "I am now," she whispered, her eyes meeting Alexia's, a spark of unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. The collision of her old life with Stefan and the fresh, intoxicating promise of Alexia's presence left her breathless. As they walked toward the studio, Anaya glanced out the sliding doors at the lake shimmering in the late afternoon sun. The world outside her door might be messy and unpredictable, but inside, here with Alexia, she could breathe, she could create, and perhaps she could love again. Chapter 15. Sparks in the Studio. The door clicked shut behind them, and the sudden quiet felt almost sacred. Anaya exhaled, leaning against the door for a moment, trying to release the tight coil of tension in her chest. Stefan's presence lingered like a shadow, but here, in the warm, sunlit studio, it began to fade. Alexia set her portfolio on the table, her fingers brushing the leather cover with deliberate care. "I didn't expect all of this," she said, her eyes scanning the room, but they kept returning to Anaya. There was curiosity there, but also something softer, something that made Anaya's stomach flutter. "I know, it's a bit overwhelming," Anaya admitted, moving toward her laptop. She opened it and began flipping through mock-ups she had prepared, trying to focus on work, but every glance at Alexia made her heart thud like a drum. Alexia leaned over, pointing at a color palette on the screen. "I like this one, but maybe we could try a slightly warmer tone here? It feels more inviting." Her fingers lightly touched the edge of the laptop, close enough that Anaya felt the electricity run straight up her arm. Anaya nodded, trying to hide her sudden awareness. "Good idea. I can adjust that." Her voice was steady, professional, but inside, she was spinning. They worked side by side, Alexia's presence both a comfort and a temptation. Each comment, each correction, carried a subtle intimacy, the tilt of a head, the way her hand hovered near Anaya's when pointing, the soft inflection in her voice that made Anaya imagine her whispering those words instead. At one point, Alexia paused and looked at her, curiosity and amusement dancing in her emerald eyes. "You're different from what I expected," she said, a teasing lilt in her voice. "Confident. Commanding." Anaya froze for a second, heart hammering. "Is that a good thing?" she asked, keeping her tone light, though her pulse betrayed her. Alexia smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that made something inside Anaya melt. "It's intriguing," she said, letting the word linger between them. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, words unnecessary. The hum of the computer and the soft rustle of papers filled the room, but underneath it, A quiet storm brewed curiosity, desire, and the unspoken question of whether this spark could become something more. Anaya shook herself slightly, forcing focus. "Let's finish these mock-ups first," she said, her voice firmer, hiding the quickened pulse in her chest. "We'll refine the rest once I make these adjustments." Alexia nodded, leaning closer to point out a detail on the screen. The brush of her shoulder against Anaya's sent a shiver down her spine. "She remembers me. She knows me in ways I didn't expect." Anaya swallowed hard, fighting the pull, reminding herself that this was business. But even as she tried to focus on the work, she felt the undeniable, thrilling spark between them, a current stronger than anything she had felt in years. And in that small sunlit studio, with the lake light spilling across the floor, Anaya realized that her life, her future, might be about to shift in ways she had never imagined. Chapter 16. Memories Rekindled. The studio was quiet again, the afternoon sunlight casting a warm glow across the table stacked with mock-ups. Anaya adjusted the papers, trying to concentrate, but her mind kept flicking to Alexia. Alexia leaned back in her chair, a mischievous smile curling on her lips. "You know," she said softly, almost as if thinking aloud, "I still remember how you used to doodle little hearts in the margins of your sketchbooks in high school. Always on the top corner, usually with a tiny signature." She glanced at Anaya, her emerald eyes sparkling. "It's funny. I never told anyone I noticed." Anaya's hand froze mid-adjustment, a pencil hovering over the page. Her breath caught. She remembers. The memory of those sketchbooks, the ones she thought no one had paid attention to, flashed vividly in her mind. Her pulse quickened, and she felt a warmth rise to her cheeks. I don't," Anaya started, but Alexia raised a hand, stopping her with a gentle shake of her head. "No, it's fine. I noticed. You always had this way of making everything personal, even the smallest sketches." "You were meticulous," Alexia said, her voice soft, almost teasing. "I guess some things just stick with you, huh?" Anaya swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. This is impossible. She wouldn't remember. She couldn't, could she? Yet the way Alexia said it, with that intimate precision, made her insides tingle. Every word, every nuance, seemed like a breadcrumb leading straight back to high school, straight back to the girl Alexia had once quietly watched from across the room. That's a long time ago," Anaya managed, forcing her voice to stay calm, though her heart hammered in her chest. Alexia leaned closer, her gaze intense, holding Anaya's in a way that made the world shrink around them. "Yeah, it is. But some things, some people, leave a mark, you know." Anaya's fingers clenched the edge of the table. She was almost certain now. She remembers, she knows me. And with that realization, a rush of excitement and fear intertwined in her chest. The professional rhythm of the studio faded, replaced by an electric tension, charged with years of unspoken connection, and now, the undeniable acknowledgement that Alexia remembered more than Anaya had dared hope. And as Alexia bent down to point out a subtle color adjustment on one of the mock-ups, Anaya's mind raced, knowing that this project was no longer just about work. It was personal. Chapter 17. Confronting the Past. The studio was quiet, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the rustle of papers. Anaya's hands hovered over her laptop, but she couldn't focus. Her mind replayed Alexia's words, the subtle hints, the way she had said her name, Anna. She remembers. She must remember. Anaya's chest tightened. Her fingers clenched into fists, then released, trembling slightly. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Alexia, can I ask you something?" Alexia looked up, her eyes curious and warm. "Of course." Anaya swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet that gaze. "Back in high school," she started, the words tumbling out with a mixture of fear and hope. Did you ever notice me? I thought, maybe. Or, I don't know, I just." She trailed off, feeling exposed, raw, like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. Alexia's gaze softened, a slow smile tugging at her lips. You You think I didn't notice you? She asked gently, amusement and tenderness mingling in her tone. Anaya's heart stuttered. I thought you wouldn't even remember me, she admitted, voice quivering. Alexia leaned back slightly, her eyes sparkling. Remember you? Anna. I noticed everything. You hiding in the back of the classroom, the way you sketched quietly, the little details you added to every drawing. I never forgot any of it. Anaya's breath hitched. Her mind raced, a jumble of relief, disbelief, and an almost dizzying sense of recognition. All these years, you remembered? Alexia nodded slowly, leaning forward, elbows on the table. I did. I saw you, Anna. I wanted to come closer, to talk, too, but you were always so careful, so guarded. I didn't want to push you away. Anaya's chest tightened, the floodgates opening. I was scared too, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know if you'd even want me there. So I hid. I stayed away, thinking it was safer. I thought, maybe you wouldn't even remember me. Alexia reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, her emerald eyes locked on Anaya's. Safe, she echoed softly. Anna, I never forgot you. I never stopped noticing. And I'm glad you didn't run forever. Anaya felt her heart skip, a shiver of relief and something more igniting inside her. For the first time since stepping into Alexia's orbit again, she felt seen, recognized, understood. And she realized with a thrilling certainty that the past wasn't gone. It had been waiting quietly for this moment. Chapter 18, Secrets Between Us. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the studio windows, painting the floor in golden slats. Anaya sat stiffly at her desk, her sketchpad open, but her hands were idle. She couldn't concentrate. Her mind kept replaying Alexia's words from the last conversation, the warmth in her voice, the way her eyes had lingered on Anna. Finally, she breathed out and said softly, I noticed you back in high school, too. Alexia looked up, eyebrows raised, curious. You did? Anaya nodded, a little red creeping across her cheeks. I watched you from the back of the classroom. You were mesmerizing. I wanted to. I wanted to say something, do something, but I was too afraid. Afraid that if I got close, you'd see me for what I was, that you'd see me as a freak. Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. Because I liked girls. And I thought, if you knew, you'd laugh or you'd hate me. So I ran. I stayed invisible. Alexia's lips curved into a soft, knowing smile, and she leaned back in her chair, letting the words settle between them. Anna, she said gently, almost teasingly. I was trying to get your attention, too. I noticed you, more than you think. And every time you ran, I thought you were afraid of me. Afraid of what I'd see. Or maybe that you didn't want to be seen with me because you liked girls, just like I did. Anaya froze, her heart hammering. You noticed me? All those times. Alexia nodded, leaning forward, elbows on the desk, her eyes locking on Anaya's. Every single time. I tried to reach out, Anna, but you kept hiding. And I couldn't force you. I thought you didn't want anyone to see you, not even me. I thought you were scared. Anaya felt a wave of warmth and disbelief wash over her, followed by a shaky laugh that caught in her throat. All these years. I thought I was protecting myself. I thought I had to hide. And you were there the whole time. I was, Alexia said, her smile tender, teasing, and a little triumphant. I never stopped noticing you. And I never stopped hoping that one day you'd see me too. And when I saw your name and your studio, I thought maybe the universe is giving me a second chance. Alexia inhaled deeply before she continued. I didn't want it to rush and scare you away again. Anaya's chest tightened, a shiver crawling down her spine. The tension, the fear, the longing of years compressed into this moment, and suddenly, it was as if time itself had bent, bringing them together at last. I didn't know, Anaya whispered, her voice trembling with awe and vulnerability. I didn't know you felt the same. Alexia's hand hovered near hers, a fraction away, as if testing the air between them. I did. I always did. For the first time in what felt like forever, Anaya felt the walls around her heart crumble. And she realized, in the quiet hum of the studio, that the past wasn't something to hide from anymore. It was the spark that had finally brought them to this moment. Chapter 19. Second Chances. The afternoon light shifted through the studio windows, casting soft shadows across the table scattered with Anaya's latest designs. Alexia leaned over, examining the sketches with an intensity that made Anaya's pulse flutter. "I have to tell you something," Alexia said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm but carried an undertone of raw honesty. "After high school, I followed your work. Every piece you put out, every exhibition. I kept track of you, Anna, even when you disappeared." Anaya froze mid-sketch, a pencil hovering over the paper. "You? What?" Alexia smiled softly, eyes locked on hers. "I watched your career. I wonder where you went, if you were happy, if you ever thought about me. And when I saw your designs now, the work you're doing, I knew there was definitely a second chance. A real one." Anaya's chest tightened. She hadn't expected this, the vulnerability, the honesty, the way Alexia's gaze seemed to strip away every barrier she had built. Finally, she exhaled and let herself speak. I need to tell you something too," Anaya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I married Stefan." She hesitated, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Not because I loved him, not in the way I should have. I married him because I knew the person I really wanted was you. I just didn't know how to reach you. I took the easy path, the safe path. But I was never happy with him. Never." Alexia's eyes softened and a faint, knowing smile played on her lips. I understand, Anna. Life doesn't always give us the clarity we need at the right time. But now," she leaned closer, voice low, teasing yet tender, "now we're here. Working together. Maybe that second chance we both wanted isn't lost after all." Anaya felt the weight of years lifting, replaced with a cautious, almost electric hope. "A second chance," she repeated, her lips curling into a tentative smile. I never imagined it could feel like this." Alexia reached across the table, brushing her fingers against Anaya's in a fleeting, deliberate touch. "It can. But only if we're brave enough to take it." Anaya's heart raced, a flurry of anticipation and fear. The designs, the studio, the afternoon sun, all of it faded into the background. There was only this moment, the possibility of rewriting the past, and the undeniable pull of the person she had been longing for all these years. And in that quiet, unspoken understanding, both women knew, this time, they wouldn't let it slip away. Chapter 20. Unspoken Currents. The studio was quiet, save for the soft scratch of pencils and the occasional clink of coffee cups. Anaya moved around the room, laying out prints and mock-ups, while Alexia lingered over the designs, her green eyes tracing every line with an intensity that made Anaya feel like she was under a microscope. So Alexia began, her tone casual, but with an edge that made Anaya's stomach flip. "I like the direction here. But this font?" She tapped the sketch lightly, leaning just a little closer than necessary. "It's a bit cold. We need warmth, character. Something that says inviting, but still exclusive." Anaya nodded, biting back the flutter in her chest. "Got it. Warmer. Inviting, but exclusive. I can do that." Her voice was steady, but her hand trembled slightly as she picked up a pencil. Alexia moved to the other side of the table, her shoulder brushing Anaya's ever so slightly. The touch was fleeting, almost accidental, but Anaya felt it like an electric jolt. She forced herself to look at the design, not at Alexia. "Not now." "You're very thorough," Alexia said, eyes glinting. "I like that. I could tell you care about every detail." Anaya swallowed, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Of course. The work, it's important. You've given me a lot of freedom here, and I want it to be perfect." Alexia leaned back, studying her quietly. "You're different from anyone I've worked with before. There's a precision to you, but also," she paused, a small, knowing smile tugging at her lips. "A spark. You make things feel alive." Anaya felt her pulse quicken, and she told herself to focus on the sketches, the letters, the colors. Focus on work. But every brush of Alexia's fingers, every intentional tilt of her head, every subtle smile felt like a message she couldn't ignore. They worked in silence for a few more minutes, punctuated only by the scratching of pencils and the rustle of paper. Then Alexia glanced up, her expression suddenly softer. "You know," she said, almost hesitantly, "I'm glad you took the job. I've been hoping for this. That we'd get to work together again." Anaya's heart skipped. She wanted to say so much, that she'd hoped for it too, that she'd been waiting for this chance for years, but all she managed was a quiet "me too." Alexia's eyes lingered, and for a long moment, neither moved. The air between them was thick, charged, full of all the words they hadn't said, the memories they couldn't forget, the tension that was no longer subtle. Finally, Alexia straightened and picked up a mock-up. "Let's see what we can do with this," she said, but her voice carried a softness, a hint of intimacy, that made Anaya's chest tighten. As they bent over the designs together, elbows brushing, shoulders touching, the studio felt smaller, warmer, alive. The professional collaboration had become a dance of glances, smiles, and unspoken confessions. Every touch, every shared laugh, every fleeting moment carried a weight they both felt, but neither dared acknowledge aloud. And Anaya, for the first time in a long while, realized that some sparks weren't meant to be hidden, they were meant to ignite. Chapter 21. The Spark Ignites. The studio had grown quieter as the afternoon light softened, the sun slanting through the tall windows and casting golden stripes across the wooden floors. Anaya and Alexia were hunched over the latest mock-ups, elbows brushing more often than not, a small jolt traveling up Anaya's arm each time. Alexia leaned over the table to adjust a sketch, and their fingers grazed, just a fleeting touch, but Anaya felt it linger far longer than it should. She pulled back slightly, heart racing, and pretended to inspect another design. "You're very particular," Alexia said, voice low, playful, teasing. "I like that. Keeps me on my toes." Anaya's eyes flicked up, meeting Alexia's. There was something in that emerald gaze, something that made her pulse stutter. She swallowed. "And you challenge me," she murmured, even as her hand shook while aligning the papers. Alexia's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Good," she said softly. Then she leaned closer again, this time their shoulders brushing, her hair lightly tickling Anaya's arm. "I like it when you take charge, but it's also intoxicating when you hesitate." Anaya's breath caught. She wanted to pull away, to remind herself this was work, that they were colleagues, that nothing from high school mattered now. Yet her body betrayed her, leaning in, drawn toward Alexia as if gravity had a new axis, one that ran straight through those captivating green eyes. They continued to work, but the air between them had changed. Every small movement, a hand shifting a pencil, a shoulder bumping, the accidental brush of a knee, was loaded with unspoken desire. Alexia glanced at Anaya from the corner of her eye, a half-smile playing on her lips, and whispered, "You know, you don't have to pretend around me." Anaya froze, heart hammering. "Pretend," she echoed, voice barely audible. Alexia leaned just a fraction closer, close enough that Anaya could smell her perfume, subtle and intoxicating. "Yes, that you don't feel it. That we're just working. Because I see it. I feel it. Don't you?" Anaya's chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to retreat, but the words caught in her throat. All she could manage was a whisper, I can't stop thinking about it either." Alexia's eyes softened, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of them, designs forgotten, deadlines irrelevant. Fingers brushed again, a longer touch this time, deliberate, lingering. The spark that had been simmering for weeks ignited fully, a fire barely contained, threatening to leap into something neither dared name aloud yet. Anaya's mind screamed caution, but her body answered differently. She leaned closer, just slightly, drawn into the gravity of Alexia's presence. The studio had become a charged space, a room where work and desire collided, where every glance, every brush of skin, Every shared breath was a silent conversation in a language only they could understand. And in that charged silence, Anaya realized something undeniable. The desire they'd buried, the tension they'd danced around, wasn't going to wait forever. Chapter 22, Evening at the Lake. The sun had dipped low, spilling molten gold across the lake, and the air was crisp with the promise of evening. Anaya and Alexia walked side by side along the narrow path winding through the trees, the gentle lapping of water against the shore accompanying their footsteps. Anaya's hands were tucked into the pockets of her sweater, her mind still buzzing from the studio, from the sparks and glances and touches. Yet as she walked here, the tension softened, replaced by something warmer, something real. Alexia slowed her pace, turning slightly toward her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she murmured, gesturing toward the shimmering water. Anaya nodded, her lips curving into a small smile. "It's peaceful." She hesitated, then added softly, like it's waiting for something. Alexia's eyes flicked to hers, a faint, teasing smile tugging at her lips. Then, without a word, she slid her hand into Anaya's. The movement was fluid, natural, as if her hand had always belonged there. Anaya froze for a heartbeat, heart hammering, but the warmth spreading through her chest quickly replaced the shock. She allowed her fingers to lace with Alexia's, the simple contact sending a shiver of ease and longing through her. It was familiar, comforting, yet charged with everything unspoken between them. They walked like that for a while, hands intertwined, steps matching in rhythm. The world seemed to narrow to the lake, the sky, the golden light, and the gentle squeeze of Alexia's hand. "Feels right," Alexia said softly, her voice almost lost in the wind. "Being here with you." Anaya's throat tightened. She wanted to say it back, to admit how long she had dreamed of this closeness, how it had haunted her for years. Instead, she simply squeezed Alexia's hand in return, letting the contact speak for her. They paused at a small clearing overlooking the lake, the water reflecting the fiery streaks of sunset. Alexia turned to her, eyes shining in the dimming light. "I've wanted this, wanted you, for so long, Anna," she confessed, her thumb brushing lightly across the back of Anaya's hand. Anaya's heart stuttered. Me too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I didn't know if you," she trailed off, the weight of years, of misunderstandings and fear, pressing against her words. Alexia leaned closer, just enough that their shoulders touched, their hands still entwined. "I think we got a second chance," she said simply, a smile soft and knowing. Anaya felt the truth in that statement, felt it in the warmth, in the hand that now fit perfectly with hers, in the look in Alexia's eyes that mirrored all the longing she had kept hidden. She nodded slowly, letting herself savor the moment, the possibility, the quiet magic of being exactly where she was supposed to be. As the sun finally sank behind the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold, Anaya Gibson allowed herself to breathe, to feel, and to let desire and hope merge in that simple, perfect touch. Chapter 23. First Tentative Kiss. The sky had darkened to a deep indigo, speckled with the first timid stars of evening. The lake shimmered with the reflection of twilight, and the cool air carried the scent of pine and damp earth. Anaya and Alexia strolled slowly along the shore, hands still entwined, each step a quiet affirmation of the connection they had built over weeks, over years, over unspoken moments. They reached a small wooden dock, empty and waiting, the gentle creak of the boards under their weight the only sound besides the water. Alexia stopped and let go of Anaya's hand for a heartbeat, searching her face. "You're incredible," Alexia whispered, voice low, almost trembling. "I've wanted this for so long, and now it's real." Anaya's chest tightened, her lips parting slightly. "I never stopped wanting you," she admitted softly, her voice fragile yet certain. The words hung in the air like fragile glass, ready to shatter or shine. Alexia stepped closer, her hands hovering near Anaya's face, uncertain yet bold. Their breaths mingled in the cool evening air, hearts hammering in quiet unison. For a moment, time suspended itself, the lake, the stars, the world beyond this dock dissolving into irrelevance. Slowly, carefully, Alexia leaned in. Her lips brushed Anaya's, soft, tentative, testing the waters of something long denied, long imagined. Anaya's eyes fluttered closed, her hands finding their way to Alexia's shoulders, the warmth of her touch grounding her. The kiss deepened, hesitant at first, then with growing certainty, a conversation in its own language, desire, relief, recognition, and the pure thrill of connection, all wrapped in the curve of lips and the press of a hand. When they finally pulled back slightly, foreheads resting together, breaths mingling in the crisp air, neither could speak. Only the slow, steady beat of their hearts and the lapping of the lake filled the silence. Alexia's lips curved into a shy, victorious smile. "You're here," she murmured, almost to herself. Anaya's heart stuttered, then roared. "Always," she whispered back, her fingers threading through Alexia's, holding on like she would never let go. The first kiss had been tentative, yes, but it carried the weight of everything they had denied themselves. And as they stood together on the dock, the stars above and the lake below, they both knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 24. First Night Together. The lake house was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of lamps and the moonlight spilling through wide windows. Outside, the lake shimmered like liquid silver, mirroring the stars above. Inside, the air between Anaya and Alexia was charged, heavy with unspoken promises and a tension that had been building for weeks, months, years. Alexia's hand brushed against Anaya's as they entered the living room, a touch deliberate and tender. Anaya swallowed hard, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. Their eyes met, and the world outside ceased to exist. Only the two of them, only this moment. Slowly, deliberately, Alexia cupped Anaya's face, her thumb brushing a stray lock of hair away. "Are you sure?" she asked, voice soft, vulnerable, yet demanding honesty. Anaya nodded, her lips curving into a faint smile. "I've never been more sure of anything," she whispered. Alexia leaned in, kissing her again, this time with more certainty, more hunger. Their bodies pressed together, tentative at first, learning the contours, the spaces, the weight of each other. Every touch, every sigh, every brush of lips was a question answered, a barrier broken. They moved together slowly, almost ritualistic, as if savoring the moment, letting the intimacy grow naturally, organically. Clothes fell away, and the heat of their bodies became a conversation of skin on skin. Fingers traced, lips whispered, hearts thundering in unison. Anaya trembled against Alexia, feeling the surge of desire and the tender grounding of love entwined. Alexia's hands were gentle, worshipful, and yet firm, holding, claiming, adoring. Every kiss, every sigh, every shiver was a confirmation. This was what they had both been waiting for, what they had longed for, feared, and dreamed of. When they finally came together fully, it was a symphony of emotion, love, desire, relief, and euphoria blended into one. Time melted away, leaving only the rhythm of hearts and the whisper of breath, the soft creak of the bed, the gentle crash of the lake's waves outside. Afterwards, they lay entwined, Alexia's head resting on Anaya's chest, their fingers laced together. Neither spoke immediately, words were unnecessary. The quiet hum of the lake, the distant rustle of trees, and their shared breaths were enough. Alexia lifted her head, brushing her lips along Anaya's collarbone, murmuring softly, "You're everything I've ever wanted." Anaya's heart swelled, and she kissed Alexia's temple, whispering, "And you're mine, always." The night stretched on, gentle, tender, and infinite, as the lake house cradled them in their new beginning, a night that was the first of many, a night where desire, trust, and love merged into a singular, beautiful truth. Chapter 25. Morning After. Sunlight spilled lazily through the tall windows, painting the room in soft gold. The lake outside shimmered quietly, almost reverent, as if honoring the night that had passed. Anaya stirred, eyelids fluttering open, only to find Alexia curled beside her, hair falling across her face like a halo of sunlight. A small smile tugged at Anaya's lips. She traced a finger along Alexia's arm, feeling the warmth of her skin, the rise and fall of her breath. Alexia murmured something unintelligible and nuzzled closer, pressing herself against Anaya as if she belonged there, which, in every sense, she did. "Morning," Anaya whispered, brushing her lips against the side of Alexia's neck. Morning," Alexia replied, voice husky, half awake, half playful. She shifted, eyes opening slowly to meet Anaya's, green eyes sparkling with mischief and affection. Anaya laughed softly, a sound that had been locked away for too long. "You're dangerously comfortable with yourself," she teased, tucking a strand of hair behind Alexia's ear. Alexia smirked, sitting up just enough to grab the sheet and tug it around herself, though her gaze never left Anaya. "Comfortable because you let me," she said, voice soft, teasing, but with a warmth that made Anaya's chest ache. The room filled with playful banter, touches that lingered a second too long, glances that said more than words ever could. Alexia leaned in suddenly, pressing a quick, mischievous kiss to Anaya's lips. "You know, I'm thinking breakfast in bed is mandatory for someone as beautiful as you," she said with a wink. Anaya rolled her eyes, but couldn't suppress a grin. "Mandatory? Since when do you enforce rules?" Alexia shrugged, sliding closer again, the sheet falling slightly to reveal the curve of her shoulder. "Since this morning. Consider it tradition," she said, voice dipping into teasing warmth. Anaya shook her head, laughter bubbling up, heart soaring. She leaned in, capturing Alexia's lips in a kiss that was playful, lingering, teasing an echo of the night before, but lighter, warmer, full of the thrill of discovery. Fingers tangled in hair, soft gasps escaping, and laughter mingling with whispered promises. The morning stretched luxuriously, full of touches, smiles, quiet teasing, and the kind of closeness that made the world outside the lake house feel like a distant memory. For the first time in years, Anaya felt completely at ease, completely seen, and completely alive. Alexia pressed her forehead to Anaya's, grinning softly. "We'll need pancakes," she said. "And maybe coffee. Lots of coffee." Anaya laughed, pulling her close. "Coffee and pancakes it is. But beware. I might just steal your syrup." The room filled with laughter and warmth, the kind that only comes from trust, desire, and love blooming slowly but surely. Outside, the lake rippled gently, and inside, two hearts beat together in perfect rhythm, beginning a day and a life full of playful, intoxicating closeness. Chapter 26. A Day Together. The aroma of coffee and sizzling pancakes filled the kitchen, mixing with the warm sunlight that poured through the windows. Anaya balanced a plate in one hand and a mug in the other, trying not to trip over Alexia's bare feet as she followed her around like a mischievous shadow. "Careful," Alexia teased, reaching out to steal a pancake straight off the plate. "I'm just making sure these are cooked to perfection." Anaya rolled her eyes but laughed, setting the mug down and leaning close. "Perfection has nothing to do with pancakes," she whispered, letting her hand brush against Alexia's as they reached for the syrup. Their fingers lingered, a spark running through both of them. Alexia smirked, eyes sparkling. "Oh, really? Then what is perfection?" Anaya met her gaze, a playful smirk tugging at her lips. Moments like this," she said softly, before letting the syrup pour over the pancakes, the sweet smell mingling with the tension that hummed quietly between them. They moved through the morning in an easy rhythm, cooking, laughing, stealing bites from each other's plates, teasing with a familiarity that felt both new and achingly familiar. Every touch was a reminder of the night before, every glance a small, private spark that only they shared. After breakfast, they settled on the porch with mugs of coffee, legs tucked beneath them. The lake shimmered lazily, reflecting the early afternoon sun, and for a while neither spoke, content just to exist in the same space. Alexia leaned back, letting her head rest against Anaya's shoulder. "You know," she murmured, voice low, "I could get used to this." Anaya smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Alexia's face. "Get used to what? The pancakes, the coffee, or me?" Alexia chuckled softly, eyes glinting with mischief. All of it, she said simply. Especially you. A comfortable silence fell over them again, but the air was charged with quiet tension, touches that lingered a heartbeat too long, glances that said more than words ever could. Every laugh, every brush of skin, every playful nudge was a thread weaving them closer together, a slow, steady pull toward something neither wanted to name aloud just yet. The day continued with errands and small tasks around the lake house, each mundane chore punctuated by playful banter, teasing, and those tiny sparks of touch that made their hearts race. When Anaya paused to wipe her hands on a dish towel, Alexia's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Don't worry," Alexia whispered, voice soft, warm. "I'm not going anywhere." Anaya's chest tightened, a rush of emotion she couldn't quite name. She nodded, letting herself smile. "Good. Because neither am I." By the evening, they found themselves back on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The lake reflected golds and purples, the world quiet and still. Their fingers intertwined naturally, fitting together as if they had always belonged there. And in that gentle, ordinary, magical day, Anaya realized that life had given her a second chance, not just at love, but at the freedom to choose, to live, to feel, to fall again, without fear, without hesitation. Chapter 27, Undeniable Pull. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the porch, painting the lake in liquid gold. Anaya sat cross-legged, sketchbook in hand, pretending to focus on designs while stealing glances at Alexia. Alexia leaned against the railing, her hair catching the light, eyes following Anaya with that quiet, unwavering attention that made Anaya's chest tighten. She had been watching her for a moment, just long enough for Anaya to feel the heat rise under her skin. "Something wrong with your drawing?" Alexia's voice broke the spell, teasing and soft all at once. Anaya blinked, cheeks warming. "No, just trying to get the perspective right." Alexia stepped closer, peering over her shoulder. Their faces barely inches apart. The air between them was thick, every breath shared. "Perspective, huh?" Alexia murmured, voice low. "Maybe you just need a closer look." Anaya's heart skipped. She wanted to pull back, wanted to say something, but instead she felt herself leaning just a fraction closer, drawn in by Alexia's nearness. Their hands brushed when Alexia reached to point at the sketch. A spark ran up Anaya's arm, and she could feel her pulse racing. Alexia smiled, catching the subtle tremor. "You're distracted," she said softly. "By me." Anaya swallowed, voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe." Alexia's laugh was quiet, teasing. "Maybe," she repeated, letting her fingers lightly graze Anaya's hand. The touch was electric, familiar, intimate, and Anaya's resolve wavered. She wanted this, wanted it more than she'd allowed herself to admit. "Alexia," Anaya's voice faltered, and she looked down at the sketchbook, pretending to focus, though every inch of her was aware of Alexia's presence, the warmth radiating from her, the unspoken invitation in her gaze. Alexia crouched slightly, eyes level with Anaya's, and whispered, "It's okay, Anna. You don't have to hide from me anymore." Anaya's breath caught. The name, the one from high school, the one Alexia had always used when it mattered, sent a shiver down her spine. She looked up, locking eyes with Alexia, and for the first time, all her defenses melted. You always remember," Anaya whispered. Alexia's smile was gentle, knowing. "I never forgot," she admitted, letting her hand rest over Anaya's, thumb brushing softly. "And I've been waiting for this moment, waiting for you." Anaya's chest tightened with longing, every instinct telling her to lean in, to close the space between them, to finally give in to the undeniable pull. And in that suspended moment, with the sun dipping lower and the lake shimmering gold behind them, the world narrowed to just the two of them, the slow-burning tension igniting into something that could no longer be ignored. Chapter 28, Triumph and Celebration. The office of Laura Colt Du Village buzzed with excitement. Anaya and Alexia stood side by side, reviewing the final mock-ups on the polished conference table. Every detail, every color, Every nuance reflected the vision Anaya had poured her soul into, and Alexia's discerning eye had refined. "It's perfect," Alexia breathed, her hand brushing against Anaya's as she gestured toward the large wall display. That touch lingered, a silent promise. Anaya smiled, chest tightening. "It's our perfect," she corrected softly. The clients arrived, and the launch presentation began. Anaya watched Alexia command the room with effortless charm and authority, feeling that familiar spark, pride, admiration, and a touch of desire mingled into one intoxicating wave. When the final applause echoed through the elegant hall, Anaya allowed herself a rare, private grin. They had done it. Together. Later that evening, the two women drove back to the lake house, the quiet hum of the car matching the stillness of their shared anticipation. The house welcomed them like an old friend, its sunlight-softened walls glowing in the late afternoon. Alexia poured 2 glasses of wine and they sat on the porch, the lake reflecting the fiery streaks of sunset. Silence stretched comfortably between them, filled with unspoken acknowledgement. "Can you believe it?" Alexia whispered, eyes on the horizon. "We did it. You did it, Anna." Anaya reached for her hand, letting her fingers lace naturally through Alexia's. "We did it together," she corrected again, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. The evening unfolded slowly, the kind of night that wraps around you and makes time irrelevant. They laughed over shared memories, brushed against each other during playful debates about design elements, and let the gentle breeze of the lake mingle with their lingering touches. Finally, when the sky darkened and stars twinkled above, Alexia leaned closer, pressing her forehead to Anaya's. "Celebrate with me," she whispered. Anaya smiled, heartful, and leaned in. Their lips met, slow and tender at first, then deeper, as if the world outside had ceased to exist. The lake's reflection shimmered around them like liquid light, a silent witness to the culmination of dreams, both professional and personal. Inside the house, laughter and quiet murmurs of love filled the spaces that had once held only solitude. Clothes discarded, worries forgotten, they explored each other with the hunger and tenderness of two souls finally unbound. When morning came, soft light filtering through the bay windows, Anaya woke to the rhythm of the lake outside and the warmth of Alexia curled beside her. She breathed in, letting herself smile fully, knowing the future was theirs built on passion, trust, and the kind of love that had waited patiently, silently, through years of longing. For the first time in a long time, Anaya Gibson felt wholly herself. Free, loved, and finally home. Epilogue, Horizons of Their Own. The lake shimmered in the early morning light, soft ripples catching the gold of the rising sun. Anaya stepped barefoot onto the porch, Alexia's hand brushing hers as they moved together, bodies almost magnetized by the rhythm of their days. The house behind them was no longer just walls and furniture, it was a sanctuary, a vessel of their journey, echoing with laughter, whispered secrets, and moments of unspoken longing finally spoken. Every corner held a memory of triumph, every window a reflection of dreams realized. Anaya's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup, warm steam mingling with the crisp morning air. She inhaled deeply, letting the scent of pine and lake water fill her lungs. Alexia's presence beside her was a constant, grounding, and wild all at once. She leaned her head on Anaya's shoulder, and the simple press of skin on skin carried more comfort than words ever could. They had both survived the quiet betrayals and the loud heartbreaks of life, and now they moved forward as architects of their own stories. Together, they built and created, laughed and loved, designing not just portfolios and logos, but a life of their own making, unapologetic, passionate, and radiant. The world outside could rush and roar, but here, at this lake, time bent gently around them. Alexia whispered a joke, and Anaya laughed until her ribs ached, the sound weaving into the wind like music. Then, without thinking, they pressed their foreheads together, a silent communion of hearts that had waited years for this perfect alignment. Anaya's thoughts drifted briefly to the past, the mistakes, the lost years, the man who had never seen her worth. She let it go, letting it fall like autumn leaves into the water, swept away by the current of the life she had chosen. She had traded fear for courage, silence for truth, and solitude for love that did not shy away. The lake stretched infinitely before them, a mirror to endless possibilities. Anaya and Alexia stood there, hand in hand, eyes reflecting one another, souls entwined. In the stillness, in the quiet exhale of the world, they understood love was not always immediate and happiness not always simple, but when it came as a tide, unstoppable, beautiful, and eternal. And as the sun climbed higher, gilding the water with molten light, Anaya Gibson smiled not just for herself, not just for Alexia, but for the life they had reclaimed, for the horizon they now walked toward, together. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and like this video and follow me for more stories. You are always welcome here, and leave me a comment or a thumbs up, just letting me know if you like the story and would like more, or is there perhaps an idea that you would like to share or let me write for you.